thank you very much for your time today. I want to start our conversation talking about a bit about the semiconductor market as a whole. In 2024, we saw the highest ever sales for the industry, surpassing $600 billion for the very first time. What's interesting is that this is happening in tandem with increased investment in fabs. Since 2021, we've seen around 100 new foundries opening across the world. First, what do you attribute this double-digit growth to? And what is your prediction for 2025 and beyond as to the state of the semiconductor sector?
Well, I think a lot of the growth is coming out of the investments that were made at the close of the pandemic and the chip shortage that we saw. Companies realized that this was a growth industry, and they could recoup their investments if they were able to deploy the capital to increase their capacity. And I think it's being driven by a lot of the technologies that we're hearing about on a daily basis. Yeah. Those are driving the demand for these advanced chips, and ultimately, I think that's what's going to pay off for these companies.
And obviously, the industry went through, incredible growth last year. Do you see this continuing in 2025 and 2026, or accelerating even further?
I think we're going to continue to see growth in 2025. I think there's a lot of uncertainty right now. Yeah. In kind of the global economics. That can certainly spill over into the semiconductor industry, but the demand is there. So as long as we don't see large disruptions, I think we're going to see continued growth in the next 1 or 2 years.
Let's talk a bit about the demand, because this is really interesting topic. Traditionally, demand growth in the semiconductor sector was driven by legacy application. I think a lot of consumer electronics, smartphones, etc. Over the past years and months, we've seen new revenue streams. Of course, AI was much talked about and covered in media with the rise of generative AI. We are also seeing more in-vehicle electronics as automakers push towards connectivity and autonomous driving. Looking at the future, which of these new applications do you believe will be the main vectors for growth for the industry?
Well, I think at the leading edge of manufacturing, it's going to continue to be AI, data centers, and the chips powering AI, high bandwidth memory. Those kind of applications, I think, are going to continue to drive the leading edge. I think the capacity of legacy nodes is going to be consumed in automotive and just the increasing digitalization and connectivity of not just cars, but the whole Internet of Things. It's kind of gone to the background in recent years in the hype sense, but those devices are still being created, and replaced at a massive scale. So that eats up a lot of that capacity.
You mentioned those legacy applications. With the new ones on top, of course, driving the industry growth. A lot of experts predict that we'll see the sector reach $1 trillion by 2030. How is Inpria preparing for this explosive growth?
Well, we're growing. I don't know if we're growing explosively, but we are investing heavily in our capacity and in the capacity we have within JSR to produce our resists and supply that leading edge growth.
Let's talk a bit and switch the focus on the photoresist market. I think the photoresist industry today is going through a transformation that is driven by new semiconductor production and, of course, the rollout of EUV of extreme ultraviolet lithography. This is creating changes in the demand for photoresist. There's new demands for the physical characteristics in terms of sensitivity or mechanical and thermal properties together with etch resistance. Why are metal oxide photoresists today touted as one of the first and best alternatives for EUV production?
Well, the reason that metal oxide resists fit so well for EUV is that they were made for EUV. These materials were designed to take advantage of the absorbance that metals bring to 13.5 nanometer light to harness and capture as much of the information that's being supplied by the scanner as possible. That allows you to, if you're not throwing away photons, that allows you to image with fewer photons and therefore save on production costs. The other aspects that really help out when patterning at tight pitches, which is what metal oxide resists are for, is the etch resistance imparted by the metal oxide character. You need a fairly thin layer of metal oxide photoresist to transfer that pattern that you've printed with your EUV scanner. and that allows you to do new etch regimes and potentially new integration schemes as well.
Of course, Inpria is one of the leaders and pioneers in the production of metal oxide photoresist. As the industry moves towards those more advanced nodes, how do you expect the demand to impact Inpria's products?
Well, I think as we get, especially below, 32 nanometers on the metal pitch, and look at more complicated layouts for DRAM and logic, we're going to see that the demand for MORs, metal oxide resists, is only going to increase. And I think that's a function of their properties converging with the kind of patterns that were always envisioned for these materials.
Talking about the growth you expect in the market, I'm curious to dig in a bit more on the relationship between Inpria and JSR. The two companies have had a long relationship. If I remember correctly, I think in 2017, JSR participated in a funding round and then did so again in 2020 before making the Inpria consolidated subsidiary in 2021. It's been 4 years now since the new structure. What would you say are the main synergies that you've been able to foster between the two firms over the past 4 years?
Well, first I would say, not just in terms of synergies, but in terms of investment. JSR, aside from the acquisition, has invested a huge amount of both human capital, expertise, but also capital to allow metal oxide resist manufacturing to really keep up with the emerging demand. In terms of synergies, JSR is a chemical company, a chemical technology company. They have a long history of excellence and innovation in not just photoresist, but across the chemical space. So I think their interest and their following of kind of the emergence of Inpria and metal oxide resist was very natural. And since the acquisition, we have exchanged a large number of technical personnel. We have a team on site from JSR of really talented assignees who help us kind of understand the JSR way and help us bring, what's fundamentally at the inception was an R&D kind of organization, turn it into a manufacturing organization, and adopt some of the quality systems and kind of manufacturing excellence that JSR has brought to the semiconductor industry for decades.
Right. I think also very interestingly with JSR, there was a big transformation within JSR last year, right? When the company was taken private following a buyout by the JIC. For Inpria, how do you see that take private move?
We don't see much of a change in the sense that JSR has repeatedly stated their commitment to developing new technologies and bringing new technologies to commercialization, right? So that's what Inpria has done since its founding, and I think we're going to continue to do that, and we've gotten very strong messaging from JSR that that's the path forward and that that's part of what JSR wants to do with that investment.
So to continue a bit on the topic of JSR and Inpria's expansion, JSR made big investments in South Korea, including a new line for metal oxide photoresist. Could you talk to us a little bit more about your expectations from this investment and why Korea was such a perfect destination for this investment?
Yeah, great question. One of the first applications for our resist in high volume semiconductor manufacturing has been DRAM, specifically advanced DRAM for HBM, high bandwidth memory applications. From that perspective, Korea is the natural site for a metal oxide resist expansion, and JSR broke ground in 2025 on a new manufacturing site. Essentially, despite their investment in Inpria in Corvallis, we simply can't produce enough material in the long term to supply our customers' demand for metal oxide resists, hence the need for a Korean manufacturing site.
If we can dig a little bit deeper into this without going too much into technicalities, but last year it was announced that both SK Hynix and Samsung had chosen Inpria's metal oxide photoresist for their new 1C DRAM processes. Obviously the technology had already been around for some years. Why do you think that it was last year that they decided to make the jump and choose your product?
Well, I think it's a convergence of the technology with the moment. For a given pattern, you want to produce as fine a feature as possible. You want to produce as high quality an image as possible. And we basically shrunk to the point for these advanced DRAM nodes that a metal oxide resist was really the only way to get the patterns at the fidelity and at the cost that the customer was looking for. Hence, we were a natural choice.
You had that investment in Korea that was recently made. Looking at the future, are there new investment that you have in the pipelines that you could tell us about?
Well, I obviously can't speak to specifics. I do think, as we target advanced logic, and look towards the future there, it is absolutely going to require additional investment, whether it's Korea or elsewhere, to produce it at the scale and the quality that our logic customers demand.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for your time today.
My pleasure.